Hi guys, I'm back with another switch teardown video, and today we're going to take a look at one of the weirdest keyboard switches I've ever seen. Now, one or two of you may have wondered, has anyone ever made a keyboard using microswitches, which is these little things that you can find in computer mice among others. Now, I know of one guy who did exactly that and made a huge microswitch keyboard, a really weird thing, and he seems to not hugely enjoy it based on his feedback. But he wasn't the first. Microswitch made keyboards with microswitches as well, or rather with switches with microswitches, and they're quite the specimen. Of course, in the keyboarding world, Microswitch are by far the most well known for the Hall effect switches they produced under Honeywell, but their origin started with their namesake microswitches, and they apparently made keyboards with those in as well. The first thing to note is that they demolish any other switch I've seen so far in height at fully 5 centimeters tall, not counting the legs, because after all the legs go under the PCB. The second tallest switch I know, beam springs, come in at 4.2 millimeters, and they don't even have legs. I mean, look at how they compare to Cherry MX switches. The second thing is that they're actually SPDT switches, single pole double throw, which means that it's a single contact that switches between two different contacts, unlike almost all other keyboard switches, which are SPST, single pole single throw, in which the pole is either connected to a contact or not connected at all. The third thing is that the switches contain an actual SM series microswitch, making these switches microswitch switches. The way it works is that the plunger, which uses 2 return springs no less, hooks into this track plate here, which has a crossbeam coming out of it at the other end. So, as you press the plunger, the crossbeam is pushed forward, and this in turn pushes on a lever which is attached to the top of the microswitch. I've cut off a large part of the housing, which I suspect is made out of bakelite, by the way, so that you can see what goes on inside a microswitch. This is a fairly typical example of how these things work. When you press the lever, it presses down on a plunger, which in turn puts pressure on a beam spring, which is biased upwards using a leaf spring. The lever contains 2 small contact discs on the end, and by default they rest against the top contact, but when the beam spring inverts, it flops down and onto the other contact, and when released, the beam spring reverts back to normal again. I don't actually have one of these keyboards yet, so I can't show you what they sound or feel like, but it's an interesting idea at least. I guess it was cheap for Microswitch to make switches based on these switches, but as the mechanical lifetime of microswitches usually maxes out at around only 10 million operations, I don't think they'd last very long. Especially considering the switches are apparently rated to 5 amp and 250 volts AC, it seems to me that these were just off-the-shelf spare parts for them, because for a keyboard that is massive overkill. Normal switches run on 5 volts. If you'd run 5 amp 250 volts through them, they'd probably melt and or burn. Counting the microswitch as 15 parts and the host switch as 6 parts, it consists of 21 parts in total. 2 housing parts, a plunger, 2 coil springs, a track plate, 2 more housing parts, a lever rod, a pusher, a beam spring, a leaf spring, 2 contact discs, 3 contact plates, and 3 contact legs, making it the most complicated switch in terms of part count that I've ever come across. Way more even than previous champion Futaba Complicated Linear, which holds the second place at 16. That's it for this switch teardown. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and see you next time.
They are like you.